Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Dance Science Podcast. Today is episode number 38, and I'm really excited to have a guest episode today. Her name is Melissa Stafford. She currently works with the Rock School of Dance. So, first of all, I just want to thank her for her time today and for sharing her wisdom with our audience. So, thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to our conversation.
So, just a little bit about Melissa. She currently runs and teaches all of the ballet curriculum at the Rock School of Dance. So, can you tell us a little bit more about your journey in dance and kind of what led you into the Rock School?
Sure. So I actually started by American standards a little bit late in ballet. I was 10. I actually had been a gymnast starting at age 6 and got into ballet through my younger sister. My little sister didn't want to do gymnastics because I was doing it, and she didn't want to do soccer because my brother was doing it. She wanted to try something different. Um, and actually, when I first started it, I was kind of like, "Ooh, I don't know about this," because it's kind of slow at first for someone who's used to gymnastics, where you can very quickly see how you're moving and trying tricks. But after seeing my sister in the Nutcracker, I was like, oh, I kind of understand what this is about now. And so then that's when I really started. Both me and my brother started after seeing her in the Nutcracker. And I was very fortunate to just be from Central Pennsylvania. So my parents put us at the Central Pennsylvania Youth Ballet under Marcia Dale Weary, who was probably the best teacher in the United States in the 20th century. So I was very fortunate to have her for 8 years. Um, my brother went on to become a principal dancer of New York City Ballet, and he's the current artistic director of New York City Ballet. My sister was also principal dancer with New York City Ballet. Um, she's now retired. A lot of my classmates had very successful careers. I saw that I was more of an average dancer, and decided to go to college. And I was like, okay, I'm going to put dance away and I'm going to do psychology, which I also found interesting. So, um, in the meantime, I also had started to do a little teaching at CPYB. Marcia would mentor us. She would even correct papers we would turn in when we would write out classes. And I would do that as a summer job. And while I was at college, I would teach in the community there. So upon graduation, Barbara Weisberger called me up and said, hey, I'm looking for a CPYB grad because I really love their curriculum. Would you be interested in moving to Baltimore and teaching? And I was like, well, I'm going to do social work, but I'll do that to pay the bills because social work doesn't make enough money. So I did 1 year of working with people with chronic mental illness and then teaching ballet the other 4 or 5 days.
Love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
And then a full-time position opened up at Peabody Preparatory, and so I decided to take that. So I have a degree in psychology, and teaching was not my original plan for my career, but I loved the growth that you can see in students. And I realized that dance is changing lives. It doesn't seem as obvious all the time when you're looking at someone with a chronic mental illness that they're working through. But I've been fortunate to meet many kids whose lives were changed through their involvement in dance. And so I've been doing that now. This is starting year 24. It's hard to believe. Yeah. Um, and early on, because of my college degree, I started getting interested in the more administrative aspects of running a school. And so I've been through various positions working in administration since I think 2005. I
So,
joined the Rock School in 2022, but I had 10 years running a program at Peabody Preparatory before that, and then I had worked with Peter Stark in Florida prior to that. So that's sort of my path of the way that I got to the Rock School and my current position, where I get to um, oversee the curriculum for pre-ballet and our after-school programming. help students make that transition, those who want to, from our after school to our more daytime professional division program, which is probably the most intense program that we offer. And then I also get to work with our outreach program, working to bring kids who maybe wouldn't have easy access to dance and bring them into the rock school at various points, so that hopefully some of them will join the professional division if that's their passion.
Wow. I mean, like, what a background that you have. It's just really amazing, all of the hats that you've worn. And now you've settled in to at the rock school. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The psychology degree has been particularly helpful because I think ballet training in the US, we don't often learn about children's development
Right.
and good practices in teaching. So we're really good at giving the information, or like learning the exercises that different schools want you to teach. But sometimes we're not always good at reaching all the students in the studio and identifying what the different needs are in front of you. And that's something that I feel like my psychology degree has really supported me in trying to work with students who maybe would not be seen as a great student.
Of course.
Maybe someone who learns differently and they're seem to be a little disruptive or disrespectful, or aren't picking it up as quickly as we hope.
Right.
And so the psychology degree has really helped me fine tune those parts of my teaching.
Right, because I'm sure you've had to learn about like age and brain development, right? And that, I mean, that just fits right into how ballet is taught from day one, right?
Right, right. And we actually have our pre-ballet curriculum now is designed by a child development specialist.
Oh, wow.
So he's not only, giving specific exercises and material that's appropriate by the age, in other words, not too hard, not too easy, but he's also scaffolding on the things that kids are working on developmentally at that time.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so if they're loving stories and imagination, he's
Right.
incorporating that in. He's also teaching social and emotional learning as part of the curriculum, and that's something that we continue on through 7, 8, 9, 10, because we could just say, stand in line, here's your set spaces,
Yeah.
uh, you know, give kids all the information and then just expect them to execute it perfectly.
No.
But what we try to do is teach them critical thinking skills
No.
and have them work out how to do something on the left side,
No.
or have them take different responsibilities in the studio to be the leader in different exercises. So there's ways to, within a standard ballet class structure, also help the students with their relationship to themselves and others in the room. And then, problem solving, and,
Right.
in the end, they're going to be a more useful dancer, somebody who can, if somebody's sick and somebody's injured and they have to jump in and learn the whole thing on the other side at the
Exactly.
last minute, we want a dancer who has the skill set to do that.
Right, because I mean, we're like you said, to piggyback off of that a little bit, we're not just teaching steps in dance, right?
Right.
There's a lot of, I mean, really all of what we learn in a dance class translates to life skills too. Life
Absolutely.
and career, yeah.
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 And I've had many students along the way who love dance, and then they go to college and do something else,
Yeah.
and dance is sort of their happy place
Mhm.
that keeps them, grounded when things are stressful in college or in their new career. But Peter Stark says something that I have found to be true, which is if you learn to do one thing well, you can do many things well.
Yeah.
And so a lot of the skills that students are learning in a ballet classroom translate to whatever else they may decide to do. And of course, the Rock School and where I trained, and Mr. Stark, we have a lot of successful alumni who are professional dancers as well. But the goal is that regardless of what the students end up doing, that they've had a positive experience and they come away knowing how to do something really well. They have, uh, they have an idea that they want to be excellent. Yeah, and know ways to work toward that goal.
Right. And they can be, right? With
Right.
support, yeah. And
Yeah.
with a good positive class environment, like you were saying too. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. So, part of what we do regularly now is meet with the teachers and talk through not only best practices, but give opportunities for the teachers to ask questions and share things that they may have found challenging, and kind of using the whole team as a resource. And then we have also done trainings for our faculty as well. So, because we have young people moving from out of state and often out of country to live with us in our professional division, we had a therapist come and talk to us about what happens in adolescence
Yes.
and understanding what's happening with the brain, the body, their emotions, and um, working with that to create the result we want rather than punishing or
Yeah.
just deciding, oh, that, that
That's
person has
pleasing.
an attitude or,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think that's great because you guys are also supporting your teachers in that way, because it's like when they have an issue or like you said, when they're stuck on something, they're not just kind of like left out to fend for themselves, right? That's where like you guys are working as a team and kind of collaborating and problem solving, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right.
Working toward.
And, recognizing that, again, most of us didn't get sort of that broader training as teachers in human development or in educational practices. Um, Even in some of the things like, we were talking about body alignment and turnout. What are more effective ways to get students to position themselves in a way that is effective but also healthy, try to avoid some of the trappings of like forcing turnout, but then also get them to improve their turnout
Yeah, exactly.
because it's a requirement in our field.
Exactly. You have to improve it. Yeah. I
Right.
think that's, there can be a misconception sometimes with dance science as like we want to like totally minimize dancers turnout, for example, to use turnout as an example, but really
Hmm.
that's not the case. There's actually a way to improve it, like you said, in healthy ways, right? When, like you said, when you start to learn better cues, better exercises to use, like we all want to improve dancers turnout at the end of the day, right? We're all
Right.
working towards the same goal, but we're just doing it in a way that's just a little bit healthier than maybe, like you said, 20 or 30 years ago when turnout was just forced.
Right.
Yeah.
And also, recognizing that like these kids that become serious in ballet are really quite extraordinary. I
Right.
mean, they have high standards for themselves. They've given up a lot of other things that you might consider a typical childhood or a typical high school experience would involve, and they have. In their mind, some of them go to college, but some of them are like, okay, like I have to be at this level at age 16 or 17. So they have a very short time span to accomplish what they want to accomplish. And so understanding, sometimes kids will do it from the wrong, will push the heels forward
Right.
instead of turning out from the top of the leg because they want to do it right. And so being looking for ways to make sure they're not inadvertently putting stress on their body,
Right.
and teaching it really from the top of the leg. One of the things I love about dance in the United States is that anybody can dance.
Mhm.
So some of my colleagues who trained in Cuba or in Russia, um, went through an audition process and
Yeah.
they were selected for an elite school
Yeah.
because of their physical facility coming in. They said, "Ooh, look, you can turn out easily. You
Yeah.
have feet that point easily. That you're going to be strong. You're
Yeah.
flexible." Um, in the U.S., we teach everybody,
Yeah.
um, and that though means as teachers we have a greater responsibility to help them figure out how to do it on their body
Right.
because a lot of students are not necessarily walking into the studio with every single attribute that might have been selected via an audition.
Right. And I mean, some of them just want to enjoy dance, you know, some of them don't want to dance professionally
Right,
and they can
right. And
benefit
in
from.
fact, we have an after school program where the kids are coming 6 days a week.
Oh, wow.
It's almost as intense as our daytime program. The difference is that you can't accumulate as many hours if you're coming, say, at 4:30 in the afternoon instead of coming at 9 in the morning. Um, and they want to dance at a high level, um, but then also have that regular high school experience. They
Oh,
may or may not go on to be professional dancers. Um, and often, when you get to that level, you are as putting, as much pressure on your body as the students are during the day.
yeah.
So we're trying to um, teach them sound technique and also make sure that they're staying as healthy as possible while they're doing that.
Yeah, and I like you that you guys have that option if dancers, like you said, want to keep that balance with other parts of their life, like go to normal school, have friends, go to social events, right? Because some dancers thrive off of that balance and not necessarily just a strict focus on dance.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when I was younger, it, it didn't feel like college was an option if you wanted to be a professional ballet dancer. Now, though, there are some really good college programs,
There are.
and companies are taking dancers past the age of 16, 17, 18
Yeah.
after college. So you just never know where people may end up. Th- they could go to college and then, for a dance program and then audition and get into a company. So uh, I think as teachers, it's important for us to um, let students know that there's a variety of options, and success in dance can look like a lot of different things.
Yeah.
Um, and college training could be part of that.
Yeah.
Um, they could also go to college like me and then end up coming back to the field and being a teacher or being involved in the field in fundraising or some other way.
Yeah, there are other ways to be involved in the field, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be like the same experience for everyone, and it's not gonna be. Yeah.
Right, right.
Hmm.
Yeah. One of the things that I really learned from my teacher was she didn't have an audition. She just took kids from central Pennsylvania and was that there are ways to, through repetition, muscle memory, like um, making sure that students accomplish something before you move them on to the next skill. Um, there are ways to train excellent dancers
Yeah.
who don't necessarily have every single physical attribute that would make ballet training easy.
Right.
And so
Yeah.
that's something that, we're through our after school program that, that's the way we're looking at it.
Right. Because I like to explain to my dancers that like sometimes simple combinations are good for them, right? And then sometimes I like throwing harder things at them, right? So can you kind of explain what's your guys' methodology with combinations and stuff like that?
Sure. So, especially in the foundational years, we think the important thing, as I mentioned, is to establish basic stance.
Yeah.
So they're working in the correct body alignment and maintaining that. Rotation from the tops of the legs,
Yeah.
right? And to do those two things, you have to have core support. So
Yeah.
we're working on developing that. And you're basically we're trying to, as my mentor Barbara Weisberger would say, create a tabula rasa, just like a clean slate of
Basics.
this is this
Yeah.
is what fifth is, this is what turnout is, this is what a tendu is.
Yeah.
And there's not a lot of complications in the first few years
Yeah. For sure.
until they're about ready to that place to transition to point.
Yeah.
Or for our young men, we have a lot of gentlemen in the program as well, until they're starting to work on tours and some of the other things that you need to do for bravura choreography. Because a lot of what advanced dancers need is done in tendu. Like, and tendus, as I experienced when I first tried ballet, are not always that exciting. But they give you what you need to know to do all of the fancy tricks and fouettes and soda shots and all of
It
that.
lays the foundation. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And so, what we're looking for is that like they're maintaining turnout when they do tendu back and body placement. um, that they're using their abdominal muscles and their back to support their arabesque and not, sinking in if they just have
Yeah.
nice flexible hips or nice flexible upper body. We're looking at the stability of their standing leg.
Mhm.
So a lot of making sure that when they're pushing their heel forward, they're not pronating,
Yeah.
but they're engaging the muscles throughout the top.
Yeah.
Um, and doing simple port de bras to start with, just a nice connection of the hand to the eyes, and um, making sure that their gaze is in the right place because that really helps with balance and their artistry eventually. But um, from that foundation, then you can really push them as they're going. But sometimes as teachers, we get eager to like, oh, we got to get to like pirouettes by this point, or we got to get to, a complicated petit allegro by this month in the year. And, we have to adapt to who we have. It,
Some.
it pays in the long run to spend a little bit more time making a good glissade
Yeah.
than it does teaching beats.
Yeah.
So.
And I know it can be hard for teachers because they might feel pressure from studio owners, directors, whatever, like, oh, I have to teach them, they have to know an échappé bateau by May. So it's like,
Right,
what am I going to do? So I,
right.
I can sense, I can empathize when teachers feel that way, when they feel the pressure. Yeah.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And, we have one of the things that Peter Stark did when he came in 2022 is he had a documented curriculum because we have fantastic faculty. I think we all know what a level is when we walk in the room just through our experience, but giving examples of exercises
Mm.
and sort of bigger guideposts. So, like, this is the year they're going on points, so these things have to be addressed. Or this is the year they start men's classes, so these things have to be addressed. But not giving them set exercises they have to do, or pacing them in such a way that they have to get certain things done at a certain point in the year.
Right.
Because some years you'll have a class that is a bunch of students who pick up quickly, and you're like, oh, I got farther.
Right.
and and they're not limited by the curriculum, so they can start the next thing if they see in their bodies that they're ready.
Right.
Other years you'll have students like, oh, this is a bunch of kids that probably would benefit from 2 years in this level.
Yeah.
And so we're going to slow down and make sure that they have the foundation that they need to be successful going forward.
Right. Because I mean, they're all still gonna learn. It just might be at a different pace, right?
Right.
They're
Right.
also gonna benefit.
Right.
Yeah.
And then the other thing that we're able to do, so this was something that my teacher did at the Central Pennsylvania Youth Ballet that we have intentionally done here as well. We allow students to take extra classes in a level below.
Hmm.
Because going back and working on those fundamentals, when you can move at a pace where you really feel what you're doing,
Yeah.
can really be beneficial. And then also occasionally there's a student who's excelling quicker than their classmates, so they can take the bar of the next level.
Oh.
to kind of like get a little push, but they're
A little
still, not stretched beyond what they're able to manage, and
Yeah.
then maybe take the whole class.
Yeah. I like that.
Yeah. So there's some customization that's available within the program based on what a specific student needs.
Right.
Um, and sometimes too, like if a kid takes 2 years to accomplish something, which happens to everybody at some point in the ballet training, um, then, that maybe they are taking that extra class in the next level just to kind of see what it is, even if they're not quite there yet.
Yeah, and I mean, like you said, taking that, even taking the younger level, those extra classes that they can take, it's, the basics don't go out of style, right? The
Right.
basics, yeah.
Yeah. And then we also often um, encourage students taking a lower level class because uh, that in a way when you go back, a light bulb will go off. I remember this when I started student teaching. At age 14 or 15, helping fix feet in the first level. And now having the benefit of more years of practice and seeing bigger steps and like, oh, that's what that was for.
Like little
you know,
habits that will develop. Yeah, yeah.
yeah, Marcia was a very direct teacher, so she would just say, do it this way. Not a lot of explanation. Well, if you do it this way, then you'll feel this, and you can someday do that. But just do it this way.
Do this.
And when I started student teaching and then became a teacher, I was able to make those connections. And I think that students, who enjoy the process also can make those connections. I've had students come back to me and say, wow, like 2 years ago, now I understand what you were trying to say. I wish I had understood it back then.
Sometimes,
Um,
I know sometimes it takes time, or like you said, sometimes just taking a lower level class, they're like, oh, that just connected in my brain all of a sudden. Yeah.
right,
Like
right.
the
Or
laser.
they've had to accrue, I think certainly this was true for myself when I was a student, like a certain number of hours
Yeah.
in my body for my body to be able to accomplish what my brain was trying to get it to do.
Right.
So I may have understood here,
But it took.
but you didn't see the fruit of that. I didn't feel it initially. You had to keep doing like that repetition and waiting for it to click.
So how do you kind of see this like progressing, like the big picture of training professional dancers at the rack school specifically?
So, in terms of training professional dancers, we're really moving in a direction of making sure that it's a classical base, but that they are versatile dancers. So, as Peter Stark says, in companies in the United States, you don't dance in the style of the company, you dance in the style of the piece.
Yeah.
And even some companies that are known for doing mostly Balanchine work or mostly classical work will still have ballets done in sneakers.
Well,
They'll still do Twyla Tharp piece. There's a whole variety of things that dancers are asked to do, and you're only going to get more opportunities to
exactly.
explore and perform if you're the one in the room who can adapt.
Yep.
And so some of the things that we're doing intentionally is number one, we're making sure our teachers are specific. So you can lean into the style of training that you are most comfortable with, your background, your performing experience, but explain to the students what it is and why. So that they can identify that as, okay, this is,
This
for
is
my teacher who danced with the Bolshoi.
yeah.
This is my teacher who trained in Cuba. This is my teacher who trained at the School of American Ballet. And then it helps them delineate, like, okay, so this teacher's saying this teacher's saying this. This is a style difference.
It's not just teaching.
It's not one is right and one is wrong.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
in this class or for this variation or this repertoire that we're working on, this is what is required.
Yeah.
It's a little bit challenging in the younger levels where we really are just trying to do less style and just more basics. That I would say, like 92 to 95% of ballet is just ballet, and the last remaining portion is style. But for our professional division, we're intentionally working on that versatility. The other thing is that we do a lot with Youth America Grand Prix, which is fantastic. It's great for them to learn classical variations. They have a concrete goal.
Yeah.
I have this piece. I started here. I'm going to get it to this level. It's great because they go on and look at other dancers to inspire them. So they use social media in a positive way.
Great
Um,
dancers go to white. Yeah, it's great. It's a great thing.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But then we have to balance that because not everything you're going to do in your career is a solo or a classical solo.
Exactly.
Um, so they're taking contemporary now, which is part of the
Yeah.
curriculum once a week. And we have a contemporary showcase now,
Oh wow.
as well as our year-end ballet showcase. And we're doing a variety of things. So we recently did excerpts from La Bayadere. This year we're going to do some excerpts from a neoclassical version of A Midsummer Night's Dream that Mr. Stark has mounted before. Our Nutcracker, we give students opportunities to do solos, but then a lot of dancers also are learning the skills that are required to be in the corps de ballet, um, which, as you know, as a teacher, like in some ways that's almost harder
And the solo.
to teach than a solo, because you're having to teach them to be aware of
Cleanliness.
how they're doing it in relation to other people, in relation to that space in the studio, in relation to the music, so that everybody appears to be doing the same thing at the same time.
Yeah.
Um, and again, those are the skills that when they transition into a professional company, everybody's going to go into a core. So they have
Yeah.
to know how to do that.
So where do most of your dancers end up dancing professionally?
All over.
Oh,
So we have some students who leave us and go to large schools, or schools affiliated with professional companies. So we have some like going to the Houston Ballet trainee program or San Francisco Ballet. We have some going to companies that might be a little bit smaller. So like we have an amazing graduate who's going to Ballet 5/8, which is a newer, smaller
yeah.
company.
I've heard.
We have some students who are going to Indiana University's program, which then from there, hopefully they will launch into a program. And then, we have students who got into the Princess Grace School, John Cranko School, and are going into a finishing program in Europe.
And I mean, I think that just speaks to the versatility of your guys' training, the versatility of your teachers too, right? How you guys are training the dancers, that they're really able to just kind of like sponges, soak up anything that they're taught. So I think
Right.
that just speaks to what you guys are teaching from a young age.
Yeah, and I think it's important that we have a team of teachers. So, some schools like you to have one teacher for an entire year, and you can get a lot done that way because every day the students know exactly what to expect coming into the room. Um, but then uh, the challenge is that even as a teacher, I'm always trying to think, oh my gosh, like, did I make sure that I addressed this kind of jump? Did I remember to do frappes today? Like when you're seeing a group of students more than once, you have that responsibility to make sure they're getting a well rounded class every time. But we all have our things that we like to do and things that we sometimes don't like to do, like
Right.
brises
Right.
or, or whatever it might be. And so there can be unintentional gaps in that model. So if our team of teachers knows sort of the range of things that we're working on, what their colleagues are doing, we can make sure we're filling everything in throughout the week. So our students have some primary teachers where they'll have one or two teachers that see them pretty frequently,
Mhm.
but then they do get other instructors as well throughout the week.
Okay. So how often do they rotate teachers?
Um, well, even in a day, for example, they'll have two or three teachers in one day, but then say they have the same ballet teacher, 3 times a week for their first technique class of the
Okay.
day.
Okay.
So that's the kind of balance. When the students are first starting our more serious training and level 1 at age 7, they have the same ballet teacher twice a week, and then they have another teacher in a different form.
Mm.
And we find that just because children at ages 7 and 8 are not as flexible in their thinking just yet, that
They like repetition a little more.
it's
Yeah.
easier for them if they don't have two different
Yeah.
voices. Even if
Little
we were saying the same thing to a
yeah.
kid at that age, it may feel different if it's not exactly the same combination.
Yeah.
Um, but then as they transition to age 9, 10, then they have one teacher twice a week and then they have two other teachers. So they start to get that variety, and we're teaching them how to adapt.
Right. That's
And then in the
yeah.
professional division, like I said, the average is they would have one teacher 3 to 4 times a week, and then they get the other teachers mixed in.
It's nice because I mean you're keeping them on their feet, right? They
Right.
constantly have to be adapting to the current combination and trying to be like a sponge picking it up. It's almost like every day is like an audition,
In a
right?
way.
Every
I
class.
think, the great thing about the amount of time that we see the students is that they do settle in, and they feel comfortable.
Yeah.
And so then they do very quickly, because they really are quite extraordinary, understand, who's asking for which things.
Yeah.
Um, but you're right. I would love for students to remember that taking class is as important as auditioning or performing.
Yes. Like every day.
And we have some amazing students. One of our graduates, her name is Noe Linz. She was like that in every class. Like,
Audition.
she was
Really?
dancing in every class.
Mhm.
And I think that that bodes well for her future success.
Yeah. Because I mean that I'm sure that took her a long way.
Right.
Reason.
So, you know, we don't want students, if we can facilitate them not just simply going through the motions, that's ideal,
Not just repeating the combinations. Yeah. Robot. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So it's a balance, because we want, that repetition is essential for strength, and for warming up the body, but then we also don't want them to do it without thinking about, how am I doing it better today?
Right. How can I continuously improve? Yeah.
Right, right.
How can
And
my artistry come through? Yeah.
right, exactly. And then in the upper levels, we often are challenging them to dance it more.
Yeah, exactly. Dance
Um,
the combinations.
yeah, I mean, that's what's so beautiful when you watch, some dancers in company class in a professional company, is,
It's the
like,
tandu. Yeah.
they are loving everything they're doing.
Just
They could do a grand
tandu.
plie and it takes your breath away.
Yeah, just one tandu. I mean, you can
Yes.
just stare at it for an hour. They do
Exactly.
it. Yeah.
We were looking at a video of how somebody was doing a coup de pied derriere with the toes drawing back and
I
shaping
never
the foot and putting it down. I was like,
certain things just really touch our hearts as teachers, right? When
That's
we
right. That's
see,
right. And something small can be very articulate and
right,
interesting to watch. And
right. Because it doesn't have to be boring. The basics don't have to be boring. We can keep the basics alive, right?
right.
And still
Yeah.
artistic.
I I think, that's a challenge for us as ballet teachers, is to figure out how to get young students, like myself at that point, excited about doing something that
Mm.
doesn't seem very big or important.
Like the basics, right?
Right, right.
Oh,
Um,
I've already done a tandu. Why do I have to keep repeating it?
yeah, well, sometimes, when you teach pre-ballet, there are some kids who come in and say, "Well, I already did that. I already know
Yeah,
that."
I already did it.
Like, and they're ready for the next thing.
Isn't it
And I think,
funny how they're
"Oh,
like,
you're
yeah,
gonna do a lot of pliés if you
yeah.
keep doing this."
They're like, oh, I already danced at home. I already figured everything out.
Yeah. Um, but some of the things that I think are helpful is, um, giving some young folks some imagery, because
Mhm.
some kids,
Yeah,
um, the reason they start dancing is because they love to move and they
right.
love to
It's so
imagine and they
freedom.
like to
Yeah,
create their own movement. And so if I can connect it to, a feeling, or, them imagining that there's somebody or
yeah,
somewhere,
yeah,
um, that can help it be a little bit less rote.
yeah.
Um, the other thing for kids like me would be like, okay, like, if you can do this well, connecting it to,
Bigger
The
steps.
fouette turn. So, like, I think about that a lot for kids who are intermediate because they really want to learn how to do fouettes. And so, like, well, when you do a tendu with a plie front turned out,
Right.
that becomes the whipping action.
Yeah.
Um, or when you're working on just a plain pirouette, that's actually an important component
Yeah.
of a
The
fouette.
building a fouette. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then, some students just love, like, okay, don't have me imagine, don't explain it to me,
Just tell
just
me
let
what
me
to
do
do.
it.
Yeah.
Just get to it.
Just tell me what to do.
Let me try it. And so then sometimes, like, going back and repeating the combination, those kids love that because they just want to try it again on their body. Um, so those are some different strategies that I've tried throughout the years to help kids get interested in doing, quote, simple things. Another thing that we encourage is that you can be really rigorous throughout the whole class, but then at the end of the class, you have to do something where they move.
Something to just get an
Right.
intro.
So for an
Yeah.
advanced class, that can be easy. It could be grand allegro, it could be a gorgeous port de bras at the end of class that leaves people feeling fulfilled. But for younger children, it can be tricky because, on the one hand, we don't want to give them something that they're going to practice wrong by accident
Mm.
because they don't have the technical skills yet to accomplish it. Um, but then on the other hand, you don't want ballet to be so static that they don't know how to move and they don't
Right.
leave feeling happy, like, I
Like
got to dance
they've done
today.
nothing. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So, one of the ways that we address that in our younger levels is we do things that are basically like gallop and skip combinations and
Mhm.
traveling steps that are more about just coordination and
And
locomotor skills,
yeah.
that make them feel like they're flying.
So
But
I
they
mean,
can be done in parallel,
yeah, it's like
they
a
don't
grand
have to have a
allegro.
perfect saute arabesque.
Right. It's training them literally grand allegro, I mean, like,
Exactly.
yeah, like they're
It-
literally, yeah. Like polka. Polka is done.
Polka steps, waltzing, many traveling steps will allow the students that feeling of moving. And then also,
It's
um,
fun.
there's some children who are not very coordinated on their feet quickly.
Exactly.
So you're
So
teaching
that
them how
might
to
be a
figure out how
challenge.
to
Yeah.
coordinate their body when they're moving quick.
Yeah. So that could be a challenge for them.
Right,
That's important.
exactly.
Yeah.
But then if you end with that, they leave feeling like they moved a little bit,
Well,
and they're interested in coming back for the next class.
yeah. Because they're like, oh, I want to jump in.
I'll handle the boring tondus
Yeah.
so that I get a chance
Yeah.
to
So that they
fly
can.
around the room a little.
So, is there anything you wish you would have known as a young dancer in your training now that you kind of see this perspective training curriculum?
Yeah, so I think I when I was younger, it felt like there weren't so many options for people who weren't going to be professional dancers.
Mm.
And so I think that I was fortunate in that I had people encourage me consider going into a smaller company or consider going to a college dance program. It didn't seem like there would be anything that would come out of that because I hadn't seen that. Um, but I, I would like young people to know that there's a variety of ways to be successful in dance,
No?
um, and that you don't have to fit a specific look or have a specific kind of career to have a fulfilling career in ballet. Um, that there's open your mind. There's a variety of options. Another thing that um, I now appreciate in a way I didn't when I was young is contemporary dance. Um, because of my great ballet training, uh, I didn't know how to let go and
Yeah,
move the
that
spine
was
in different ways
me in
or
college.
drop the weight,
Yeah.
use the pelvis in different ways. Um, and there's so many possibilities if you're opening to learning to move in contemporary styles.
And I mean, like, I tell my dancers too, like, the contemporary will support their ballet, believe it or not. And it goes both
Right,
ways.
right.
Yeah.
When I started my job at Peabody Preparatory, Barbara Weisberger at that time was the artistic advisor, and the director of the program initially was, um, she was a postmodern dancer. She had trained in Germany, and she was pretty skeptical about ballet training, um, because what she had felt like she was getting was kids that were stiff
Mm.
that didn't know how to move their bodies.
Mm.
And Barbara Weisberger said, no, exactly what you said. Those two things support, like the principles of dance are the principles of dance. And if we improve and refine the ballet training,
Right, exactly.
the dancers are going to be better when they come to you because
Right.
they're going to have an instrument that can adjust what you're asking them to do.
Mm.
She was an amazing contemporary teacher. Her name was Carol Bartlett. Um, and she had a curriculum from like starting around age 9 or 10 all the way up to the advanced level, doing things that most students didn't get to do until college. So doing like real improv and composition, um, and doing site specific choreography.
Wow.
Uh, and the missing component for her dancers was having that instrument that had been trained in ballet. And she saw the fruit of that. So when we started, at that point, the ballet program was a la carte. So some kids would take a lot of classes, some kids would take the minimum one or two.
Mm.
And then as a ballet teacher, you had a whole range of
Different
ability
levels,
at
right?
the same age and same level.
Yeah.
And so what we did by putting in some parameters, like this is what the first level looks like, this is what the second level looks like, and curriculum,
Yeah.
when they got to her, she knew what they knew, which had not happened
Yeah.
consistently prior to that. So then she was able to do more interesting work with her high schoolers because of what they were getting in the
Starting
ballet
early.
classes. And
Yeah.
there's certainly differences in the way uh, contemporary dance approaches, where the weight of the body is and going off balance. Whereas in ballet, like we say, we go off balance, but really never go off
It's,
balance.
yeah, everything is
um,
basically erect. Yeah.
right, right. And my first real experience with it was going to a summer program at the Juilliard School and having Paul Taylor dancers. And now I'm like, oh, I understand what they did. They looked at us and thought, oh, these kids don't know anything about modern dance. And they started us like with like the fundamentals of the Taylor technique. And in 3 weeks, I was like, oh my gosh, I think I'm starting to understand this.
Oh,
And it would have been interesting if I had been more open to that at 16, 17, 18 to explore that more.
right. If you would have had contemporary from a young age.
Exactly. And also saw it as like a viable career path with like,
Right.
a company,
Yeah.
um, going forward. And,
Yeah.
and then the other thing I think too is like, um, my brother and sister both went to college along the way while they were dancing professionally, and that's the other thing I wish students, I wish I would have known, and I want students to know now, is that doing some kind of college, whether it's online, a course by course, or if you go to college for dance and then audition, it's made such a difference in
I agree.
my career in the ability to
I agree.
be an administrator and teacher and a communicator.
Nope.
Um,
Totally agree.
yeah, or for example, in your case, you went into dance science, but then you could branch out into physical therapy
Yeah.
or, uh, art therapy, dance therapy. It gives you so many avenues later.
Yeah. And I mean, you become a better teacher.
Right,
No matter what you decide to dip into, it helps your
right.
dance teaching. Yeah.
And often, because dancers are very good at like knowing how to do like okay, I have this goal of I'm going to graduate a 4-year program. In order to do that, I have to chunk it into smaller chunks and just focus on those smaller chunks and I'll get there. They're often quite successful in college.
Yeah.
So it does not have to be, oh, I'm going to dance or I'm going to go to college.
Right. It doesn't have to
They,
be one or the other. Yeah.
yeah. And so I'm really glad that that is a more viable path now, and think that, dancers should keep their minds open to
Yeah.
that.
I mean, now there's even online options, more accessible options, shorter programs, different
Right.
certifications. Yeah.
Right, and there's even programs where you can use your professional experience
Mhm.
for some of your credits,
Yeah.
to chunk some of it out.
So, what are some of your challenges as a ballet teacher? Or maybe even in your curriculum development, whatever you kind of want to focus on?
Sure. Um, so I touched on, how I love in the US that anybody can learn to dance and
Yep.
anybody can learn to do it well. One of the hard things to see is when there's a kid who loves it and they've improved so much, um, and they have a set goal in mind, whether it be placing at a certain level in a competition or getting into a particular pre-professional program or a particular company, and that doesn't happen in that moment when they're expecting it.
Mm.
To talk through working through that challenge.
Work. Yeah.
That's hard because they've invested so much time and energy, and sometimes that can feel like a failure.
Mm.
And so, sometimes kids are able to pick themselves back up and pivot and go in another direction at that moment. And unfortunately, starting my 24th year of teaching, I've seen kids that were amazing dancers who just give it all up at that point.
Mm.
And so that's a challenge. And I think that, you know, the US accommodates a wide variety of dancers, but it's still, there's few positions.
Yeah, because I was thinking, sorry to cut you off a little bit, but I was thinking too, like, is it more when that happens, is it more that like the dancer doesn't necessarily fit like the specific style of the company, or is it just more like technique wise, you know?
Right, it can be a variety of things. There can be very competent dancers who go out and do 40 auditions, and there's just somebody a little bit better in the room. And then the other thing, when you do a competition and you're hoping for a particular score,
Mm.
um, that is somewhat subjective.
Of course.
It's not like the Olympics that we all just watched this summer where there's a clock.
Reading and yeah.
I mean, we all saw what happened with the gymnasts, with the female gymnasts, and they're still trying to figure out what the fair way to score that was.
Yeah.
And that's even, I think, probably more codified than
Dance.
how
And ballet.
things, work, because it's artistic as much as it's physical.
Right.
Sometimes you just have a connection with someone.
Mm.
You're just like, oh, I like the way that person
I know.
moves.
That's why sometimes I feel like maybe it's more like the style of the choreographer, maybe,
Right,
or of the
or
dancer.
personality or the way they're presenting themselves. And we as dancers can't control who else is in the room with us.
Right. That's the hard part.
You can only control what you can do. My husband's a classical musician, and it's similar. Like, you go into an audition, and there might be 60 people that have the same kind of background and training as you, and there's one spot. So that means 59 people are not going to get it. But that doesn't mean that they're, not successful and have a chance somewhere else, or, can move forward in the field.
Right.
So, very often it's not that the dancer isn't prepared.
Exactly. It's not
It's
the same.
just
Yeah.
the way it played out at that moment. But it can, when you're that age, it can feel like
Oh,
it's
of course.
everything.
Yeah. I mean, when these kids have invested, I mean, they've sacrificed from a young age.
Right,
They've physically and mentally put themselves through hard work. And
right.
to feel that rejection is probably, I mean, I can't imagine.
Right. It's very difficult, and it takes, some resilience, and um, some healthy self-esteem and
Right.
self-confidence to
Yeah.
say that a no now is not a no forever.
Yeah, and I mean, I think really they're gonna find a company that fits them, you know? Maybe
Right.
that company just, maybe that wasn't a fit, you
Right.
know? Choreography, in terms of choreography or something, the method maybe, like we're kind of saying, yeah.
Right. So that's hard to see, and I think the more that we can try to prepare the kids through, the way we interact with them when they're younger is helpful.
Yeah.
But you can't
You can't
you
control who
can't
there, yeah.
make everybody absolutely prepared for that moment. I also think sometimes when kids become very good very young,
Mhm.
that in it can be its own challenge.
Definitely.
And that's why it's important to us that they also learn to dance in the core.
Yeah.
Because this often happens, and sometimes we see it when students come in for the summer intensive and they're the best in their school, and now they're in a level where there's a
Yeah.
lot of good kids,
Yeah. And it's
and
different,
it
it's the
can
pool of
be
dancers is different. Yeah.
right. It can be like, oh my gosh, like I didn't
Not half of this
realize
anymore. Yeah.
what this is really going to be. um, and so we have a responsibility to prepare the kids that are like phenomenal when they're young for the fact that they'll be this in their career.
Like
Yes,
it'll
they'll
be
be phenomenal, but then there'll be some times when they're with everyone else who's phenomenal.
right.
And then how do they then take it to the next level to rise above that and not let that be discouraging?
Right. And of course, being a good core dancer is also going to help their, if they're already talented, being a core dancer is still going to help them with the cleanliness and the musicality. And yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in fact, I think um, it's essential in most American companies. It's very rare for American dancers or dancers in American companies to not do some time in the core.
Hmm.
Um, and so, um, even if you're like a really excellent dancer and you deserve a solo role, when you're coming in at 18 and there are people who are 25, 30 who've been there for a long time, you're not necessarily going to get that opportunity immediately to do
Right.
the solo role.
So
You're
being
gonna,
prepared. Yeah.
yeah, you're going to be put in the core and they're going to see how you do. They're going to get to know you.
Right. Because every school kind of has its own way of doing things. Yeah.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah.
What are some of your favorite parts of your job? We were talking about those light bulb moments. Is that maybe one of them?
Yeah, so I actually enjoy teaching younger dancers,
Me too.
um, which because I think you can see big growth quickly. So
Mm,
that's very gratifying. Um, Also, the longer I've taught, I've had this experience several times where there's a student that didn't seem overly enthusiastic in class, kind of just did the work. They were a great kid. And then you'll get an email or letter um, about how much they loved ballet and what
oh,
it gave them. And you're thinking, really? And so one of the things that I love is like you'll never know, like the seed
you
that
never
you're
know.
planting.
Mhm.
Um, Sometimes it takes a long time to see the growth.
Mhm.
And I like being in this position where I can start with kids younger and then follow them
Yeah.
and have a chance to see that seed grow and then blossom, or hear from them at some point how meaningful that was for them.
Mm.
Um, and then also, I think, interestingly, I've learned probably the most as a teacher from this. As teachers, we have students who um, we find it hard to enjoy teaching. They just push our buttons, you know, for whatever reason. And often looking back, those are the times when I've had to go back and self assess and say, okay, let go of your own frustration or concern that they were, distracting the other students or derailing the lesson. And what does that kid need?
Yeah. What do
And,
they need? Because they're
what is
really
that
thinking,
behavior
right?
telling me
Yeah.
so that I can adapt it? And if both you and the kid are willing to stick it out, and that doesn't always happen, um, you can really sometimes see a tremendous transformation and maturing.
Mm.
Um, I had a colleague in Baltimore who said, sometimes those are the kids who need dance the most.
Oh, are you kidding me? Yeah. Yeah.
uh, but it requires a lot of patience, and sometimes,
A lot.
we lose our patience of trying different strategies. So actually, in some ways, it's amazing when you see a talented dancer go on and be successful, and you knew that they could do that, and it was possible, and you see it come to fruition. But sometimes it's also thrilling to see a kid who's neurodivergent
Mm.
go on and be successful and just become an advanced dance student, totally focused, doing vocabulary well, doing well in school, and you're like, wow.
Because, I
Like,
mean, ballet helps them too,
exactly,
helps them.
exactly that. Ballet was giving them a way to learn skills in a different way than they were
Structure.
learning in the rest of their life,
Mhm.
and it made a difference.
Yeah.
Um, I've certainly had students who have shared, their families have shared that they have ADHD or
Hmm.
they're on the autism spectrum, and that they started doing better in school when
Oh, yeah.
they did more serious dance training
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
they were able to translate what we were asking them to do in dance and understand, hey, that's the same path to success in my academics.
Yeah. There's a lot of studies coming out about how dance, affects the brain. Parts of the brain light up, and yeah. It's amazing to hear that how that works in real time, with a real human.
Right, right. And, sometimes those students who have behaviors that we might consider to be disruptive in a ballet studio, um, they're not getting a lot of positive feedback in most class settings.
Mm.
So the gentleman who trained our pre-ballet teachers, Luciano Aymar, said, behavior is consistent across settings. So when you see something in your pre-ballet or your ballet class, chances are they're seeing that in other social activities. They're seeing it at home. They're seeing it in their academic setting. And so uh, if we can find a way to like redirect
Work
what
together.
that behavior is telling us and get it to go in a positive and then give them positive reinforcement, that
Yeah.
can mean a lot to a student in terms of improving their self-esteem.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big deal because usually when we hear or when we see disruptive behavior in a classroom, we want to go at it with our frustration, right? Or kick the cat
Right.
out of class right away, right? So I like this different idea that you guys are taking with it of approaching it with love, right? And finding out like the root of the problem. Like like you said, where is it coming from?
Right.
What's
Right.
what are they feeling? Maybe they're feeling an emotion that they just can't express, maybe something's going on at home, maybe
Right.
something happened at school, maybe something happened with a friend, right? We never know.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's sort of understanding that, as you said earlier, that ballet is teaching us life skills.
Life skills,
And
yeah.
so, understanding that the way that you structure your classroom and the way that you work with students, um, trying to catch them doing something good so you can praise them, as
Yep.
well as giving them a lot of feedback to help them, do better. Um, Giving students different responsibility in terms of leadership. So,
Mm.
a lot of traditional ballet classes, it's great. Like, okay, if you're like the most focused student and you know the combination, then you get like this special spot in the
Yeah.
center, like where
Maybe.
everybody can follow you. And yeah, that's a carrot.
Yeah.
But there are some kids that are like, I'm never going to do that. And they shrink back. But requiring them, say, to change lines or change groups or
Yeah.
change who the leader is
Mm.
asks them to step up and
Right.
and It's going to require more patience because I have to say, when we're a leader, we do this. They're not going to do it instantly, but in the long run, then when they do accomplish that, then they've developed a new skill and they have confidence
Right.
in that new skill that hopefully then can translate into other areas of their life.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, instead of just following the same leader constantly, then they're like, oh, what if I become the leader? That can
Exactly.
improve what we're doing. Yeah.
Right.
So, yeah.
Right. And then the other piece of it that we talk about with our faculty a lot, and my teacher, Marcia Dale Weary, and her faculty live this day in and day out: correct everybody.
Yep. Every kid.
So, corrections are a vote of confidence, like that,
Mhm.
hey, you can do it better, especially if it's presented in a way that makes them want to do it better and not feel bad about how they're doing.
Not doing.
Um, and so kids that don't get that interaction feel like they're not improving.
And that they're not part of class, right?
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And so you could be a simple strategy such as just making sure you are walking around the bar or
Right.
doing a
Every kid.
checklist like, did I say every kid's name today?
Yeah.
Um, and changing the way you're grouping kids as they go across the floor so that it's not always the same group going first or the same few dancers always grouped together.
Right.
One teacher told me, hey, if you want to learn how to jump, put yourself with the dancers that already know how to jump. Travel across the floor with
It,
them.
it really does logically make sense when you think
Right,
about
because
it.
you're
Yeah.
going to figure out, you're going to move with their
Mhm.
timing. We're piggybacking on the idea that human brains like to like copy,
Right.
you know? And so, I can do that for younger kids. I can figure out like, oh, this one's strong, this one's weak, and I can pair them up
Yeah.
instead of always
Instead
letting
of
them
just
choose their partners.
strong ones. Yeah. Yeah. I think
Yeah,
that's a wonderful idea. I love that.
yeah.
Is there any piece of wisdom you'd like to share with our audience today? I mean, the whole podcast was wisdom, but is there anything else you'd like to kindly share?
Um, that's a good question. I think, um, you know, you mentioned it, and Barbara Weisberger used to say it, that teaching is communicating the love of ballet,
Yeah.
um, the love of what you do, and then um, having confidence that you as a teacher, because you love it, and you had other people who taught you who loved it and shared that with you, that that you can share that with others. Um, and, don't let a bad class that didn't go as you planned or um, uh, looking at a group of dancers and saying, oh man, they're not doing this yet. Don't let that um, define you as a teacher or discourage you.
Mm,
Just keep doing what you love.
mhm.
And if you keep looking at the students, often you're learning from them.
Yeah. Yeah. We're learning almost more than we're teaching them, right?
Right, right. Not only do you have to learn it again or remember what it feels like when you're breaking it down to teach it, but then you're getting information back from them all the time about how that's going.
Yeah. Like, are they getting it?
Yeah, and then the other thing is, I love watching my colleagues.
Me too.
I don't get to do it as much as I would like to, but or watching other people teach master classes, not to judge it, but just to be like, oh,
Yeah. Different, different strategies. You pick up different things. Yeah. I love
right. That's another. I never thought of it that way. I never tried it that way, and that works. And there's been a lot that I've adapted in teaching over the years, or even in the way that we've adjusted the curriculum.
Yeah.
Not only as we see what the field needs, but as we see, hey, that's more efficient, that works
Yeah.
better.
Just different
Um,
improved ways of the traditions that we've used for years. Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, I mean, it may work for some dancers to say, feel your heels forward. My
Yeah.
teacher said heel forward a
Yeah.
lot.
Mine too.
But now we're saying you should cue turn out from the hips.
Right. Different. Yeah.
And
Different.
so those are some of the adjustments that you can see by, watching other people and learning from your colleagues.
And I mean, it just everything goes to show because I mean, like, look at the rock schools dancers. Look at their Instagram. Look at how amazing you guys are doing at training your dancers, but making them versatile. I think is the most important thing that you guys do. It's
Right.
exposing them to different methods, different teachers, and keeping them on their feet.
Right.
Yeah.
And, doing it sort of within parameters,
Yeah.
and clearly, so that they know what it is they're doing. So it's
Yeah.
not confusing for them, mentally or physically.
Yeah. What an amazing episode. I just want to thank you so much for your time today.
Yeah, thank you, and look forward to further conversations.
Yes, and in the show link, I will also link, even I'll link the Rock School's information to the Rock School's website, but also your own. I think you shared with me your Instagram and your TikTok. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I don't have much of a social media presence individually, but the Rock School has YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, as well as our website. So I
Yeah.
shared all that.
Yeah, I'll be happy to share all of their links. Thank you again.
Wonderful. Yeah,
Yes.
and we have for people who are tuning in from all across the US or around the world, um, we have summer intensives that they can come and get an experience at the Rock School. And then people who are more local to Philadelphia can take advantage not only of potentially coming to train here, but see our Nutcracker on the Avenue of the Arts on Broad Street in Philadelphia.
Yeah, what I'll do is in the show notes, I'll also put like a little list of other things that they can check out, like, your guys' Nutcracker, your summer intensives. Yeah, I'll make a
Right,
little list.
yeah. The exciting thing about our Nutcracker is it's the dancers of the future. So we have moments for our younger children to get their first time on stage in a professional production.
Wow.
But then we rarely hire guest artists because
I
we
love
are
that.
usually able to give opportunities to our professional division dancers to do Dewdrop, to do the Sugar
I
Plum
mean,
Fairy and
that's a big
Cavalier.
deal for a full Nutcracker. I mean, it's
Exactly. And for our audience, it's still a high quality project, and you're like saying, "Hey, I knew them when." So some of the star graduates like Christine Shevchenko and Beck Ann Sisk and people like that, they did a Nutcracker here at the Rock before their career took off.
wow. So I mean, what an amazing opportunity, and I like that you guys include the young dancers too. I mean, how cool
Yes.
is that to be?
Yeah.
Imagine.
Um, it's performing in the Nutcracker is optional, but we see it as really tied to what we're doing in the studio. Um, that it's an important part of their education to be able to go out and put into practice what they've been doing in the studio and perform in front of an audience.
Right, or at least just go see the Nutcracker. If they don't
Right.
be a part of it. Yeah,
Right.
just
Yeah,
be.
and Philadelphia is a great dance town. And there's
Yeah.
a lot of wonderful dance here, and then also a lot of companies come through. So there's many opportunities for people in Philadelphia to see great dance for all different companies and genres.
So when is your guys' Nutcracker this year?
It's December 6th, 7th, and 8th at
Perfect.
the Miller Theater, which is part of Ensemble Arts Philly. Um, so Broad Street, for those of you who know Philadelphia, there's a section of it called the Avenue of the Arts. It actually starts at our school at the corner of Broad and Washington. That's the beginning of it. And it goes up towards City Hall, and it includes a bunch of amazing theaters and
Wow.
organizations. So we get to train our dancers on the Avenue of the Arts, and they get to perform on the Avenue of the Arts.
Wow. So they're like on that one street. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you again for today's amazing, amazing, amazing conversation. Truly, I appreciate it, and it just like I said, it just goes to speak to the quality of the training that the RAC school is giving. So, thank you for
Yes.
the amazing work that you guys are doing.
Yep. And thank you for this podcast. It was
Yeah.
fun listening to some of your other episodes and
Yep.
saying, yes, that's great. Because the more we can share best practices
Yeah.
in our various outlets, the better dance training gets in the US.
Right. And there's fun ways to improve things.
Yes.
Teaching anatomy can be fun.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So thank you so much. I just really appreciate it.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks.